While important people work day and night to cure cancer and make the world a better place, I decided to chart magazine prices throughout the years for some reason. Starting in 1981 and ending in the 2010s, I wanted to see the rise and fall and price fluctuations of American publications like Electronic Gaming Monthly, Nintendo Power, GamePro, and a whole bunch of other classic magazines that could only sustain themselves for a few years. Join me as I take you through the ups and downs of the magazine industry, $1 at a time. Alright, it's November 1981, and we're kicking things off with Computer Gaming World, and Electronic Games followed close after by Analog, which is going to have a name change here pretty quick. But first, Video Gaming Illustrated and Video Games, there's that name change that I'm talking about. They went to Analog Computing in November 1982. Now we see a couple more join the party with Video Games and Electronic Fun with Computer and Games. Now, of course, that one is going to have a name change here in a minute, but before we get to that, we have Ahoy! And there's that name change that I'm talking about, followed directly by them going out of business, which you're gonna find is actually a pretty common trend. Speaking of trends, this is unfortunately the first, but not last time that we're gonna see a bunch of magazines go out of business. We're in the doldrums of the Great Games Crash right now, and not a lot of companies are willing to spend the money to make a magazine, especially towards game consoles. It's worth mentioning that the few magazines that did hold on were all about $3 each, which in today's money is about $10. Now, a couple of the rules that I had for this chart was that I wanted it to be nationally published magazines, and I didn't want it to be console-specific magazines, like, you know, the official US PlayStation magazine or anything like that. You're gonna find that I'm gonna break both of those rules very quickly, but I have good reason to, I think. The first rule I'm going to break is the whole nationally published thing, because as hard as Steve Harris tried, he just could not get Electronic Game Player into the rest of the country. However, I got to include it here, not because of the price, but because of its importance, and how it led to Electronic Gaming Monthly. And then you may have noticed that the other rule that I'm going to break is Nintendo Power, because you got to include Nintendo Power. Yes, it's a console-specific magazine, but it's so important to the story of games journalism. If it wasn't for the success of Nintendo Power, you just wouldn't have Game Players and GamePro and Electronic Gaming Monthly and Video Games and Computer Entertainment, and they're all, right now, front and center in this chart. This is actually a pretty stacked list of magazines right here, but we're going to see a couple more join the fray in a minute. They're all around $4 right now, but look at that. We got Game Informer coming in at free for the first issue, going right up to $4, just like everybody else. Everybody's in lockstep with the price, but then Electronic Gaming Monthly raises it to $5. We'll have to see if others follow suit. And now we get a couple of more magazines show up with both Die Hard Game Fan, one of my favorite magazines, and Electronic Games is back from the dead. It's been rebooted. It's going to be just the first of several magazines that end up getting resurrected. And I mean, Die Hard Game Fan will eventually be resurrected. Alright, as we're about to enter 1994, I want you to pay special attention to Game Players right there. In just 12 months, they had 7 price changes. I don't know what was going on. Now, it's probably worth mentioning that I was going to include EGM2, but I wanted to save that place for Next Generation, which just showed up. Part of the problem is that EGM and EGM2 both were kind of lockstep with their price, so that wasn't very interesting. But don't worry, we're going to get to Expert Gamer, which was the spin-off of EGM2 in 1998, which is coming right up. In the meantime, what we're going to see are some name changes, including Die Hard Game Fan become Game Fan, and Game Players become Ultra Game Players. Also, Video Games, the Ultimate Gaming Magazine or whatever it was called, that one went out of business. And then check out what both Next Generation and Computer Gaming World do here. Both of them decide to dramatically raise the price. Multiple dollars here. They go up to like $8. And then in the very next issue, right back down and then up and then down and then up and then down. It's just a roller coaster ride with those two. Unfortunately, we're now in an era where there's some blink and you'll miss it magazines like Game On came and went that only lasted a few issues. Gamers Republic is going strong right now, but it also only lasts 3 years. You're also going to notice that Expert Gamer finally showed up. That used to be EGM2, now it's Expert Gamer. Insight Video Gaming is one of the more interesting stories because it goes from, 99 cents to $1.99 to $3.99, back to $1.99, and then to $3.99, and then just disappears. Unfortunately, that's just going to be a trend that goes into the 21st century because we have GameFan going out of business. Followed soon after by Gamers Republic. Expert Gamer finally takes its final form, which is Game Now, and of course Next Generation goes out of business, which really has just left a big hole in my heart. Now, as you can tell, we've kind of stabilized a bit now that we're in 2002, going into 2003. Play has joined, same with Gamer. Computer Gaming World is still by far the most expensive. It's about to get more expensive. It's going to go up to $9, which is a high. None of the magazines go higher than $9. And there goes Game Now, which of course started out as EGM2, went to Expert Gamer, then to Game Now, and then right to the graveyard. Now, you may have just noticed that Electronic Gaming Monthly, for the first time in a decade, just raised their price from $5 to $7. That's going to fluctuate a couple of more times in 2005, going down to $5 and then up to $6, and it's going to stick at $6 until its death in 2009. Oh, hey, we finally get to talk about Hardcore Gamer magazine from Tim Lindquist and Greg Off, who of course were from Die Hard Game Fan. It has a lot of the same energy. It even has the Monitor. Of course, I'm a little biased here because it's also the magazine that featured me and, of course, Defunct Games. You can find just about every single issue in PDF form on the Defunct Games website. Now, you may have noticed the Computer Gaming World just changed its name to Games for Windows, and you know what that means. Yeah, it's not long for this world. We just got done talking about how Electronic Gaming Monthly didn't raise their prices for like a full decade, but Nintendo Power went even longer. For basically 12 years, Nintendo Power charged $5. It was $4.95 and then $4.99. But in October 2008, it's up to $6, which is the price they would keep right up to the final issue. As we stumble our way into the 2010s, we see magazines like Play and Hardcore Gamer magazine bite the dust, unfortunately, which gave us the rise of the Zombie magazine, what with the return of Electronic Gaming Monthly, and of course GameFan. Oh, and then there's At Gamer, which is officially the final new magazine that we're going to add for this chart. Unfortunately, I think you know what that means, and it's that a whole lot of magazines are going to start going out of business, including some long-running elder statesmen like GamePro. That's a big one. They're around for almost a quarter century. But even with the new games and consoles and everything else, they just couldn't compete with the internet and YouTube. Sadly, the same goes for Nintendo Power, which closed its stores in early 2013. The truth is, the next couple of years is just a bloodbath for games journalism. There were definitely signs that some of these magazines weren't going to stick around very long, and it was really just a matter of who was going to fold first. In this case, At Gamer goes first. That, of course, is soon followed by the Zombie Electronic Gaming Monthly, and GameFan ended up lasting into 2015, which is definitely longer, but that comes with a giant asterisk. That's one of those magazines that had a bunch of months between issues before it closed, so to say it was still alive, it was more on hiatus, if you ask me. And with that, we have the last magazine standing, Game Informer. Now look, I'm not going to bore you by showing you another decade of this chart, because it doesn't change. For the next 10 years, Game Informer is all that we have, and it's always priced at $5.99. It doesn't fluctuate at all. All you really need to know is that it started in September 1991, and it ended in September 2024. I think we can all agree that that is a great run. Hey, thanks for watching me dig through these magazine price changes. By the way, if you just want the video without my yapping, I've uploaded a visual-only version where you can just focus on the numbers and the moving lines and all that. You know, if that's your thing. Now, here's the question I have for you. What was the first video game magazine you ever owned? Maybe it was one that you bought, or maybe it was one that was given to you. Let me see your answers in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back later this week with a review of Nano Apostle and Spreadsheet. Yep, those are real games. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,